Number 1. Jinghua Wu. Security footage from November 2008 showed a former employee entering a Silicon Valley office building on the same day he had been terminated just hours earlier. The access point registered at the main entrance, credentials still active despite the morning's dismissal. Investigators later confirmed the administrative gap that allowed the same-day re-entry. Jinghua Wu arrived in the United States in the early 2000s with advanced engineering credentials and a work visa tied to specialized employment in the semiconductor industry. He secured a position at Skyport Inc., a startup developing components for mobile technology applications. Colleagues described him as technically proficient and reliable. He maintained regular hours, participated in project meetings, and received performance evaluations reflecting consistent contributions. Wu supported a family and managed the financial obligations common to households adjusting to life in a high-cost region. His employment status directly determined his legal authorization to remain in the country, a dependency documented through immigration filings. By mid-2008, economic conditions had destabilized operations across the technology sector, and Skyport Inc. implemented workforce reductions affecting multiple departments. On the morning of November 14, 2008, Wu was called to a termination meeting as part of a broader restructuring effort. Records indicated the decision followed standard corporate protocols for downsizing rather than performance-related dismissal. The separation included instructions for returning company property and finalizing administrative tasks. Wu expressed disagreement with the decision during the exit meeting, referencing prior evaluations and project completions. He left the facility after the morning termination, but retained possession of building access credentials. That same afternoon, after purchasing ammunition at a local retailer, surveillance systems recorded him re-entering the office during business hours. He proceeded to a conference room on the second floor, where CEO Sid Agrawal, Vice President of Operations Brian Pugh, and Human Resources Director Marilyn Lewis were conducting a scheduled meeting. 3 individuals were found deceased inside the conference room. Wu exited the building and left the premises in a vehicle registered to his residence. Law enforcement received notification from staff who discovered the scene after the conference room remained closed past the scheduled meeting time. Officers arrived within minutes and secured the location. Initial observations confirmed 3 deceased individuals and no additional persons present in the room. Investigators reviewed building access logs and identified Wu's re-entry timestamp that afternoon. Witness statements from employees who had seen him in the corridor were collected. A description of his vehicle and license plate information was distributed to regional agencies. Officers located Wu at a residence approximately 6 hours after the incident. He was taken into custody without resistance. Forensic examination of the conference room recovered a firearm and ballistic evidence. Timeline reconstruction matched the afternoon access log entry, with the period when employees reported hearing sounds consistent with the incident. Investigators documented Wu's same-day termination and the access credential discrepancy. Digital records from his personal devices were examined for communications or searches related to planning. Financial records showed mounting pressures connected to the loss of income and immigration status uncertainty. Prosecutors filed 3 counts of first-degree murder in California State Court. The case proceeded through pretrial motions over several years due to defense challenges regarding mental state evaluations and evidence admissibility. The trial began in 2013. Prosecutors presented testimony from employees describing Wu's reaction to the termination and his statements during the exit process. All access logs, forensic analysis, and witness accounts established his presence at the location hours after his dismissal. Defense attorneys argued that economic desperation and visa dependency created diminished capacity. Psychiatric experts provided conflicting assessments of his mental state at the time of the incident. Jurors reviewed evidence showing premeditation through the retention of building access, the ammunition purchase, and the specific targeting of executives involved in the termination decision. The defense maintained that external pressures beyond his control contributed to impaired judgment. After deliberation, the jury returned guilty verdicts on all counts. The panel concluded that the evidence demonstrated intent and planning. Wu received a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Appeals focused on the adequacy of mental health evaluations and jury instruction, but appellate courts upheld the convictions. He remains incarcerated in California state custody. Cyport, Inc. ceased operations within months of the incident as investors withdrew and projects were suspended. The case confirmed that the access credential should have been deactivated immediately upon termination, a procedural failure that allowed same-day re-entry into the facility without detection. Number 2. Amy Bishop. A faculty member who stepped out briefly to retrieve documents from an adjacent office returned to find colleagues on the floor and others attempting to provide aid. The witness immediately contacted campus security and described observing one person leaving the room moments earlier. The report initiated an institutional lockdown protocol that extended across multiple buildings within minutes. Amy Bishop completed doctoral studies at Harvard University in the late 1980s, with a focus on molecular biology and neuroscience research. She accepted a tenure-track position at the University of Alabama in Huntsville, where she taught undergraduate and graduate courses, while conducting laboratory research on cellular mechanisms. Faculty records documented her teaching assignments, committee participation, and grant applications submitted for external funding. Bishop resided in the area with her family and maintained the schedule typical of academic professionals balancing classroom instruction with research obligations. Colleagues interacted with her during departmental meetings and collaborative projects. Her research publications appeared in scientific journals, and she supervised students working toward advanced degrees. By 2009, the university's tenure review process had begun evaluating her application based on criteria including research productivity, teaching effectiveness, and service contributions. The review committee concluded that her portfolio did not meet standards required for permanent appointment. Bishop received formal notification in early 2010 that tenure had been denied, a decision that effectively terminated her academic career at the institution. On February 12, 2010, the biology department held a scheduled faculty meeting in a conference room on the third floor of the Shelby Center for Science and Technology. Approximately 12 faculty members attended to discuss curriculum planning and administrative matters. The meeting proceeded through routine agenda items for nearly an hour. Bishop was present throughout the session and participated in discussions. At approximately 4 p.m., while the meeting continued, faculty members in attendance reported hearing sounds and observing individuals suddenly collapsing. 6 people sustained injuries. 3 individuals were later determined to be deceased. Bishop departed the room and exited the building. Faculty who had stepped out temporarily discovered the scene and initiated emergency response. Campus police arrived within 3 minutes of the initial call. Officers secured the conference room and requested medical assistance. Paramedics transported injured individuals to regional hospitals. 3 faculty members, identified as Gopi Podala, Maria Ragland Davis, and Adriel Johnson, were confirmed deceased. The 3 others survived with varying injuries. Investigators interviewed witnesses who had been present in the meeting. Descriptions of the sequence of events were collected. Officers reviewed security footage from building entrances and identified Bishop leaving the premises. A firearm was recovered at the scene. Ballistic testing confirmed the weapon had been discharged multiple times. Bishop was located off campus and taken into custody later that afternoon. Forensic analysis of her vehicle and residence produced additional evidence. During background investigation, authorities in Massachusetts contacted Alabama officials regarding a 1986 incident in which Bishop's brother had died from a gunshot. That case had been classified as accidental. Investigators also reviewed a 1993 incident involving a dispute at a restaurant where Bishop had been questioned but not charged. The pattern of prior events became relevant to prosecutors building their case. The state of Alabama charged Bishop with 3 counts of capital murder and 3 counts of attempted murder. Proceedings extended over 2 years as defense attorneys requested evaluations and filed motions challenging evidence. In 2012, Bishop entered a guilty plea to all charges to avoid capital prosecution. The plea agreement required allocution, in which she acknowledged her actions during the faculty meeting. Prosecutors presented victim impact statements and evidence detailing the planning that preceded the incident. Defense attorneys argued for consideration of mental health factors. Though the guilty plea eliminated a trial phase, the court reviewed sentencing options under Alabama law. Bishop received a sentence of life imprisonment without parole on each murder count, with additional concurrent terms for attempted murder charges. She did not pursue appeals following the guilty plea. She remains in Alabama state custody. The university implemented revised security protocols for departmental meetings and enhanced threat assessment procedures for personnel decisions. Investigators confirmed that the tenure denial had occurred approximately 3 months before the faculty meeting, establishing a timeline between the professional setback and the subsequent events. Number 3. Jennifer San Marco. Dispatch logs from January 30th. SE 2006 recorded 2 separate emergency calls within a 90-minute period from locations 40 miles apart. The first originated from a residential address in Goleta, California. The second came from a postal processing facility in the same city. Initial responders at each scene operated independently until investigators observed commonalities in witness descriptions that prompted coordination between teams. The timeline discrepancy raised questions about how events at both locations could have occurred within such a compressed window. Jennifer San Marco worked for the United States Postal Service at a mail processing facility in Goleta throughout the late 1990s and early 2000s. She held positions involving sorting and distribution operations, tasks requiring adherence to scheduled shifts and accuracy standards. Co-workers recalled her as someone who kept to herself and rarely participated in social activities outside work requirements. By 2003, supervisors and colleagues began documenting concerns about her behavior during shifts. Reports describe statements she made, suggesting suspicions about others monitoring her activities or coordinating against her. Management initiated discussions with her regarding these concerns. Medical evaluations were requested, and she was placed on administrative leave pending assessment. San Marco did not return to active employment following the leave designation. She relocated from the area, but maintained some connection to acquaintances in the region where she had worked. On January 30th, 2006, emergency personnel responded to a residence in Goleta after neighbors reported hearing disturbances. Officers discovered Beverly Graham, a former neighbor of San Marco, deceased inside the home. The preliminary assessment indicated she had sustained fatal injuries. Approximately 90 minutes later, a second emergency call originated from the Goleta postal facility, where San Marco had previously worked. Employees at the processing center reported that multiple individuals had been injured. First responders arrived to find 6 postal employees deceased and others seeking shelter in secured areas of the building. Witnesses described observing someone moving through the facility. Security personnel confirmed that entry had been gained through a door requiring identification credentials. Investigators at the postal facility interviewed employees who had taken cover during the incident. Several recognized the person they had seen as a former coworker who had left years earlier. Building access records were examined to determine how entry was achieved despite terminated employment. A stolen or retained identification badge was recovered, explaining the breach of security protocols. Officers connected the 2 locations after determining San Marco had previously resided near Beverly Graham and had worked at the postal facility. Vehicle records showed a car registered to San Marco was located in the facility parking area. Authorities discovered San Marco deceased inside the building from a self-inflicted injury. Forensic teams processed both crime scenes. Evidence collected at Graham's residence and the postal facility was analyzed for connections, and investigators reviewed San Marco's medical leave documentation and interviewed former supervisors about the circumstances leading to her departure from employment. Records from the period before her leave showed escalating concerns about paranoid statements she made regarding conspiracies involving co-workers. Mental health professionals who had evaluated her during the leave process were contacted to provide background. The case did not proceed to trial due to San Marco's death at the scene. Authorities released findings confirming she was responsible for both incidents based on physical evidence, witness identifications, timeline reconstruction, and recovered materials. Postal Service officials conducted an internal review of security protocols that had allowed a former employee to access the facility using credentials that should have been invalidated. Federal workplace safety agencies examined the adequacy of threat assessment procedures for employees placed on medical leave. The review identified gaps in tracking individuals who departed under mental health-related circumstances and in ensuring identification credentials were systematically recovered and deactivated. No criminal sentencing occurred. The investigation concluded with official determinations that connected both locations to San Marco through documentary and forensic evidence. The postal facility implemented enhanced identification verification systems requiring biometric confirmation in addition to badge access. The case remained open briefly while investigators confirmed no additional persons were involved. The timeline contradiction that initially puzzled responders was resolved once vehicle movement records and witness descriptions established the sequence that allowed travel between both locations within the recorded window. Number 4. Nathan Dunlap. A maintenance worker arriving for early morning cleaning at a restaurant in Aurora, Colorado, discovered a manager's vehicle still parked in the lot hours after closing time. The employee found the rear entrance unlocked despite standard protocols requiring full facility lockdown before departure. Inside, equipment remained powered on, and cash registers showed incomplete closing procedures. The irregularities prompted immediate contact with management and subsequent notification of authorities. And Nathan Dunlap grew up in the Denver metropolitan area and attended local schools before entering the workforce in his late teens. He secured employment at a Chuck E. Cheese entertainment venue in Aurora, a facility combining dining service with arcade games and children's activities. His position involved food preparation, customer service, and maintaining cleanliness standards during operating hours. The work environment required interaction with families, coordination with team members during busy periods, and adherence to health and safety regulations. Employee records documented his hire date in 1993 and his assignment to evening shifts when the venue experienced highest traffic. Managers conducted routine performance evaluations tracking punctuality, customer interaction quality, and compliance with operational standards. But by mid-1993, supervisory staff identified concerns regarding Dunlap's conduct during shifts. Documentation noted instances of conflicts with coworkers and responses to managerial directives that did not align with workplace expectations. Following additional incidents, management terminated his employment in July 1993. Dunlap departed the facility after receiving notification and completing exit procedures. On December 14, 1993, the restaurant operated on its regular schedule, remaining open until approximately 10 p.m. Staff members completed closing tasks including securing cash registers, cleaning kitchen areas, and preparing the facility for the following day's operations. Dunlap entered the venue as a customer during evening hours and made purchases at the arcade section. Surveillance footage documented his presence in public areas during business hours. After posted closing time, employees completed final duties and began departing. 5 staff members remained to finalize administrative tasks and secure the building. Shortly after midnight, individuals in nearby businesses reported hearing sounds emanating from the Chuck E. Cheese location. At approximately 5 a.m., the maintenance worker discovered the unlocked entrance and incomplete closing procedures. Officers entered the facility and located 5 employees in different areas of the building. 4 individuals were confirmed deceased. 1 employee, Bobby Stevens, had sustained a gunshot wound to the jaw, but remained alive. Paramedics transported him to a medical center where he underwent emergency treatment. The deceased were identified as Sylvia Crowell, Ben Grant, Colleen O'Connor, and Marge Kohlberg. Investigators documented the scene and collected physical evidence. Stevens provided information to authorities once medically stable enough to communicate. He described events following the restaurant's closure and identified a former employee as the person he had observed. Officers reviewed employment records and determined Dunlap had been terminated 5 months prior. His residence information from personnel files led investigators to a location in Aurora. Dunlap was apprehended within hours of the discovery. Forensic examination of evidence collected at the scene proceeded through laboratory analysis. Ballistic testing confirmed weapon characteristics. Timeline reconstruction used surveillance footage showing Dunlap's entry as a customer and witness accounts describing the period after closing. Investigators determined he had remained concealed inside the facility rather than exiting with other customers. Financial records and personal items recovered during searches of his residence were examined for indications of planning. Colorado prosecutors filed 4 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of attempted murder, and additional charges related to robbery. The trial commenced in 1996. Prosecutors presented testimony from Stevens describing the sequence of events and identifying Dunlap. Surveillance footage established his presence during business hours. Former managers testified regarding the circumstances of his termination and statements he had made, expressing resentment. The forensic specialists detailed ballistic findings and timeline evidence. Defense attorneys challenged the reliability of witness identification under traumatic circumstances and questioned forensic methodology. They argued that Dunlap's age and background warranted consideration during penalty deliberations. Jurors reviewed evidence over multiple days. The panel returned guilty verdicts on all murder counts and related charges. The sentencing phase involved separate proceedings to determine punishment. Colorado law permitted capital sentences for multiple murder convictions. Jurors concluded that aggravating factors outweighed mitigating circumstances. Dunlap received a death sentence. Appeals proceeded through state and federal courts over 2 decades. In 2020, Colorado's governor commuted his sentence to life imprisonment without parole following the state's abolition of capital punishment. He remains in Colorado custody. The case established him as one of the youngest individuals convicted in a workplace mass shooting. The chance discovery by a maintenance worker who noticed procedural irregularities initiated the investigation that would reconstruct events from the previous night. Number 5. Radio transmissions between law enforcement units responding to an active incident in Aurora, Illinois on February 15, 2019, documented an escalating exchange of fire that continued far longer than typical confrontations. Communications logs showed officers requesting additional tactical support and medical units within minutes of arrival, indicating resistance beyond standard response protocols. The extended engagement pattern suggested preparation or positioning uncommon in workplace incidents. Gary Martin relocated to Illinois in the early 2000s and secured employment at Henry Pratt Company, a manufacturing facility producing industrial valves and water infrastructure components. His position involved assembly line operations requiring mechanical skills and adherence to production schedules. Martin worked alongside employees in a facility that maintained continuous operations across multiple shifts. Personnel files documented his hire date in 2004 and his assignment to the plant floor where he operated machinery and completed quality control checks. Co-workers described interactions limited primarily to work-related discussions. Martin maintained housing in the Aurora area and followed routines typical of manufacturing sector employees. In 1995, prior to his Illinois employment, Martin had been convicted of a felony offense in Mississippi related to aggravated assault. That conviction legally prohibited him from possessing firearms under federal statutes. In 2014, Martin applied for a firearm owner's identification card in Illinois, a state requirement for gun purchases. The application process included background check procedures intended to identify disqualifying factors. Martin obtained the identification card and subsequently purchased a handgun from a licensed dealer. The background check system failed to detect or properly process his prior felony conviction, allowing the transaction to proceed. By early 2019, all supervisory staff at Henry Pratt identified performance concerns regarding Martin's attendance and conduct during shifts. Management initiated standard progressive discipline procedures documented in his personnel file. On February 15, 2019, Martin received notification to attend a meeting at the facility. The session involved human resources personnel and his immediate supervisor. During the meeting, which began at approximately 1:30 p.m., management informed Martin that his employment was being terminated based on accumulated performance issues. Standard termination procedures included collecting company property and completing exit documentation. Shortly after receiving notification, individuals inside the facility reported hearing sounds consistent with gunfire. Employees in various sections of the building sought shelter or exited through available routes. 5 individuals sustained fatal injuries. They were later identified as Trevor Weiner, Russell Byer, Vicente Juarez, Clayton Parks, and Josh Pinkard. Multiple others sustained injuries during the incident. Martin moved through different areas of the facility following the initial events. Aurora police officers arrived at the scene within minutes of the first emergency call. Upon entry, officers encountered active gunfire directed toward them. 5 law enforcement personnel sustained injuries during the exchange. Officers established positions and attempted to locate the source of fire while coordinating evacuation of employees still inside the building. The engagement continued for an extended period, documented in radio transmissions. Tactical units arrived to assist with building clearance. Martin was located deceased inside the facility. Forensic teams processed the scene and recovered the weapon used during the incident. Ballistic analysis confirmed characteristics matching injuries sustained by victims and responding officers. Investigators examined Martin's background and discovered the 1995 felony conviction that should have prohibited firearm ownership. Illinois State Police reviewed records of his 2014 firearms identification application and the subsequent handgun purchase. The investigation revealed that database errors and communication failures between state and federal systems had allowed the background check to return approval despite the disqualifying conviction. Authorities interviewed co-workers about Martin's behavior leading up to the termination meeting and reviewed his personnel file documenting the progressive discipline process. Because Martin died at the scene, no criminal prosecution occurred. Federal and state agencies conducted reviews of the background check failures that permitted his gun ownership. The Illinois State Police acknowledged systemic errors in processing applications and cross-referencing criminal history databases. Families of the deceased filed civil litigation against Martin's estate and the firearms dealer who processed the sale. In subsequent proceedings, jurors in civil court determined that negligence in the background check process contributed to the ability to obtain the weapon. A $60 million judgment was awarded to families, though actual recovery remained limited due to Martin's financial circumstances. The civil case established that multiple points of failure in the verification system had occurred between the application submission and purchase approval. Federal and state authorities implemented enhanced database integration protocols following reviews of the case. Illinois revised procedures for cross-referencing state firearms applications with national criminal history repositories. Henry Pratt Company resumed operations after facility repairs and security assessments. The extended radio transmission pattern that initially indicated an unusually prolonged confrontation was later understood through reconstruction showing Martin had positioned himself strategically within the facility's layout, creating extended engagement conditions for responding officers. Number 6. Tyrese Devin Haspel. Construction workers entering a Manhattan luxury condominium on July 14, 2020, to complete scheduled renovation work, discovered electrical equipment left running and cleaning materials scattered across multiple floors of a penthouse unit. The contractor had been granted access by building management after the property owner failed to respond to entry confirmation requests. The workers immediately notified building security upon observing conditions inconsistent with the unit's typical maintenance status. Tyrese Devin Haspel grew up in New York and completed secondary education before seeking employment opportunities in the metropolitan area. In 2018, he connected with Fahim Saleh, a technology entrepreneur who had founded multiple ventures, including a ride-sharing application operating in developing markets. Saleh hired Haspel as a personal assistant, a role involving management of daily schedules, coordination of travel arrangements, oversight of residential property matters, and handling of financial transactions on Saleh's behalf. The position required access to accounts, authorization to make purchases for household and business needs, and familiarity with Saleh's routine movements between properties and offices. Haspel maintained regular communication with Saleh regarding appointments and logistical requirements. The working relationship continued for approximately 2 years, with Haspel managing increasingly complex administrative responsibilities. Saleh conducted periodic reviews of expenses and account activity as part of standard financial oversight. In early 2020, discrepancies appeared during one such review. Saleh identified unauthorized transactions totaling tens of thousands of dollars that had been processed through accounts Haspel managed. The discovery indicated systematic diversion of funds over an extended period, Rather than immediately pursuing criminal charges, Saleh proposed a repayment arrangement allowing Haspel to return the money through installment payments. The agreement was documented and Haspel continued in his assistant role while the repayment plan proceeded. On July 13, 2020, Saleh traveled to his residence at a condominium building on Manhattan's Lower East Side. The property featured private elevator access directly into the penthouse unit. Security footage documented his arrival in the early evening. The surveillance system captured his entry into the elevator, accompanied by another individual. Both persons ascended to the penthouse level. Saleh did not respond to communications from business associates or family members throughout the following day. On July 14th, the construction crew arrived for scheduled work and gained access through building management protocols after Saleh did not answer entry confirmation attempts. Workers discovered Saleh deceased inside the unit. Evidence suggested attempts had been made to clean and alter the scene. Power tools and cleaning products were located throughout the space. Building security immediately contacted authorities. Detectives from the New York Police Department arrived and secured the penthouse. Forensic specialists documented the scene and collected materials for laboratory analysis. Medical examiners conducted post-mortem evaluation to determine cause and manner. Investigators reviewed building security footage showing Saleh's arrival the previous evening and the individual who accompanied him in the elevator. The footage provided clear images that were used to identify Haspel. Detectives examined the timeline of Saleh's final known movements and communications. Financial records were subpoenaed to trace the embezzlement Saleh had discovered months earlier and the repayment arrangement that followed. Credit card transaction histories revealed purchases made after Saleh's death using his accounts. With security camera footage from retail locations captured images matching Haspel making purchases of cleaning supplies and other materials on July 14th. Investigators traced Haspel's movements following his departure from the building and located him at a residence in New Jersey. He was taken into custody on July 17th. Digital forensics teams analyzed communications between Haspel and Saleh, including messages regarding the repayment plan. Financial analysts reconstructed the embezzlement pattern and documented the discovery timeline. Physical evidence collected at the scene underwent testing to establish connections to Haspel. The state of New York charged Haspel with murder in the second degree and related offenses. Pre-trial proceedings extended over several years as defense attorneys filed motions and both sides prepared for trial. In 2024, the case proceeded to court. Prosecutors presented testimony from financial experts detailing the embezzlement and subsequent repayment agreement. Building security personnel described elevator access protocols and identified individuals on surveillance footage. Forensic specialists testified regarding evidence collected at the scene and timeline reconstruction. Transaction records showed purchases made with Saleh's accounts after his death. Digital evidence demonstrated planning through searches conducted on devices associated with Haspel. Defense attorneys argued that the prosecution's timeline contained gaps and questioned the sufficiency of forensic connections. They presented alternative theories regarding events inside the penthouse. Prosecutors countered with comprehensive documentation, linking financial motive, access opportunity, surveillance evidence, and post-incident behavior. Jurors deliberated and returned a guilty verdict on the murder charge. Haspel received a sentence of 40 years to life in prison. He filed notice of appeal challenging evidentiary rulings and jury instructions. He remains in New York State custody pending appellate review. Saleh's family and business partners released statements following sentencing. The technology ventures he had founded continued operations under new leadership. The case confirmed that the embezzlement discovery had occurred approximately 6 months before the incident, establishing the timeline between the financial confrontation, the proposed repayment arrangement, and subsequent events. The chance discovery by construction workers who noticed unusual conditions during a routine entry initiated the investigation that would reconstruct the final movements and financial relationship between employer and assistant. Number 7. Michael McDermott. Network monitoring systems at Edgewater Technology in Wakefield, Massachusetts, flagged unusual login activity on December 26, 2000, when multiple workstations remained active well past the facility's typical holiday skeleton crew hours. The pattern indicated concurrent access to terminals across separate departments during a period when most staff had taken extended leave. System administrators reviewing the anomaly remotely noted access credentials associated with an engineering department, employee appearing in human resources and accounting server logs simultaneously. A technical impossibility under normal circumstances. Michael McDermott relocated to Massachusetts in the 1990s and established himself in the technology sector as a software developer, specializing in applications for business operations. He joined Edgewater Technology, a consulting firm providing internet and software solutions to corporate clients, where he worked on code development and systems integration projects. McDermott maintained an apartment in the Haverhill area and commuted to the Wakefield office for his assignments. Colleagues described him as technically capable but socially withdrawn, preferring to work independently rather than participate in team activities or casual workplace interactions. His personnel file documented satisfactory performance reviews and consistent completion of assigned projects. By 2000, the federal tax authorities had identified outstanding liabilities in McDermott's account, stemming from unfiled returns and unpaid obligations accumulated over several years. The Internal Revenue Service initiated collection procedures and issued wage garnishment orders to his employer. Edgewater Technology's payroll and human resources departments received legal documentation requiring them to withhold portions of McDermott's compensation and remit those funds directly to the IRS. The garnishment began appearing in his pay statements in late 2000, reducing his take-home income substantially. McDermott expressed frustration to coworkers about the financial impact and specifically referenced the departments responsible for implementing the withholding requirements. December 26, 2000 fell on the day after Christmas. and Edgewater Technology operated with reduced staffing as many employees extended the holiday break. McDermott arrived at the facility during morning hours. Personnel from the accounting and human resources departments were present to handle end-of-year processing tasks and maintain essential administrative functions. Between approximately 11 a.m. and noon, individuals working in other sections of the building reported hearing sounds from areas where those departments were located. Staff members investigating the source discovered multiple colleagues unresponsive in their workspaces. 7 employees were found deceased in offices and cubicles, primarily concentrated in the accounting and human resources sections. All victims had sustained fatal injuries. McDermott remained on the premises and was located by responding officers in a different area of the building. Wakefield police secured the facility and requested assistance from state investigators, given the scale and complexity of the scene. Forensic teams documented each location where victims were found. The deceased were identified as Craig Wood, Jennifer Capobianco, Cheryl Troy, Rose Manfredi, Louis Javel, Janice Haggerty, and Paul Marceau. All held positions in either accounting or human resources divisions. Investigators interviewed surviving employees who had been present in other departments during the incident. Witnesses described McDermott's movements through the building and his specific targeting of individuals in the 2 departments. Officers recovered weapons from the scene and processed them for ballistic comparison. Examination of McDermott's workspace revealed materials indicating familiarity with the facility layout and employee assignments. Detectives obtained his personnel records, including documentation of the IRS, wage garnishment, and correspondence between McDermott and the payroll department regarding the withholding. Human resources staff provided statements about his repeated complaints regarding the garnishment's implementation. Financial records confirmed the timeline of when garnishment orders were received and processing began. Digital forensic specialists analyzed the network activity that had triggered administrative alerts, determining McDermott had accessed multiple workstations while moving between departments. Massachusetts prosecutors charged McDermott with 7 counts of first-degree murder. The trial proceeded in 2002. Prosecutors presented testimony from survivors describing the systematic progression through specific departments and the deliberate targeting of individuals in accounting and human resources roles. Payroll administrators testified about the garnishment orders, and McDermott's expressed anger regarding those departments' compliance with federal requirements. Forensic evidence established weapon characteristics and victim locations throughout the facility. Communications between McDermott and co-workers in the weeks before the incident were introduced, showing escalating resentment toward the departments he held responsible for his reduced income. Defense attorneys pursued an insanity defense, all presenting psychiatric evaluations, suggesting McDermott experienced delusional beliefs that accounting and human resources staff were part of a conspiracy against him, beyond simply processing garnishment orders. Mental health experts testified about assessments indicating possible detachment from reality. Prosecutors countered with evidence of planning, including the selection of a day with reduced staffing and the specific targeting of employees by departmental function. Jurors reviewed the distinction between anger driven by financial stress and genuine mental illness preventing understanding of actions. The panel concluded that evidence supported findings of deliberate intent rather than impaired capacity. Guilty verdicts were returned on all murder counts. McDermott received 7 consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole, ensuring he would remain imprisoned indefinitely, regardless of future legal changes. Appeals challenged the rejection of his insanity defense and questioned whether psychiatric evidence had been properly weighed. Appellate courts upheld the convictions after reviewing trial records and expert testimony presented to jurors. He remains in Massachusetts state custody. Edgewater Technology continued operations with enhanced security protocols and mandatory workplace threat assessment training for management personnel. The network monitoring pattern that initially appeared as a technical anomaly was later understood as documenting McDermott's movement between workstations and targeted departments, creating the simultaneous access signatures that prompted administrative review. Number 8. Connecticut required that resignation meetings involving evidence of policy violations be conducted with union representation present when the employee was a union member. On August 3, 2010, management scheduled a meeting with Omar Thornton without following standard notification procedures for union attendance. The deviation from established labor relations protocols was noted in subsequent investigations as unusual given the documented surveillance evidence prompting the session. Omar Thornton grew up in Connecticut and entered the workforce in his 20s, securing positions in delivery and warehouse operations. In 2008, he was hired by Hartford Distributors, a beverage wholesaler supplying beer and alcoholic products to retailers across the region. His role involved driving delivery routes, operating commercial vehicles, and managing inventory transfers between the warehouse and customer locations. The position required a commercial driver's license and adherence to company policies regarding product handling and security. Thornton lived in the area and maintained the schedule typical of distribution sector employees working early morning shifts. Co-workers described limited social interaction, with most exchanges confined to logistical discussions about routes and deliveries. His employment file documented standard performance evaluations and attendance records without significant disciplinary actions during his initial years. By 2010, warehouse management had implemented enhanced surveillance systems throughout the facility to monitor inventory control and prevent loss. Cameras positioned at loading docks and storage areas recorded employee activities during shifts. In July 2010, security personnel reviewing surveillance footage identified irregularities in Thornton's movements during his shifts. The recordings showed him removing products from warehouse stock and placing them in his personal vehicle rather than designated delivery trucks. Additional footage documented multiple instances of similar behavior over several weeks. Management compiled the evidence and scheduled a meeting with Thornton for August 3, 2010. The session was arranged for late morning after Thornton completed his delivery route, and company officials, including human resources representatives and supervisors, attended. During the meeting, management presented the surveillance evidence and informed Thornton that his conduct violated company theft policies. Rather than terminating him immediately, officials offered him the option to resign, avoiding formal termination proceedings. Thornton agreed to resign and completed paperwork documenting his departure. The meeting concluded shortly before noon. Moments after signing resignation documents, individuals inside the facility reported hearing sounds consistent with gunfire. 8 employees sustained fatal injuries. 2 others were wounded but survived. Victims were located in different sections of the warehouse and office areas. Thornton moved through the building following the initial events. and Manchester police received emergency calls at approximately 12:15 p.m. Officers arrived within minutes and established perimeter positions around the facility. Employees who had evacuated provided descriptions of Thornton and his last known location inside the building. Officers attempted communication but received no response. Tactical units were deployed to conduct systematic searches of the warehouse sections. Thornton was found deceased inside the facility from a self-inflicted injury. Paramedics transported the wounded to medical centers. The deceased were identified as Brian Sirigliano, Craig Peepin, Louis Felder, John Ewer, Victor James, Edwin Kennison, Francis Fazio, and Douglas Scruton. Investigators processed the scene and recovered a weapon. Ballistic analysis confirmed characteristics matching injuries sustained by victims. And detectives reviewed the surveillance footage that had prompted the resignation meeting and examined timeline records showing the compressed period between the meeting's conclusion and the incident. Thornton's personal communications and social media activity were analyzed for indications of planning or motive beyond the immediate confrontation. In messages sent during and after the events, Thornton claimed he had faced racial discrimination at the workplace, suggesting that motivated his actions. Investigators interviewed co-workers and reviewed company records for evidence supporting claims of discriminatory treatment. Human resources files and employee complaints were examined. No documentation of racial harassment or discrimination involving Thornton was located, and fellow employees provided statements indicating they had not witnessed discriminatory behavior toward him. The investigation concluded that the resignation meeting precipitated by theft evidence represented the immediate catalyst. No criminal trial occurred due to Thornton's death at the scene. Connecticut authorities released findings confirming he was responsible based on witness accounts, forensic evidence, and timeline reconstruction. Federal workplace safety officials reviewed the incident and examined Hartford distributors' security protocols and employee termination procedures. The review identified that the meeting had proceeded without union representation, despite Thornton's membership status, a procedural deviation from standard labor relations practice. Hartford distributors ceased operations permanently within weeks of the incident, as the company could not recover from the loss of key personnel and the associated operational disruption. Civil litigation filed by victims' families addressed security measures and the handling of the resignation meeting. Settlements were reached without admission of liability. Connecticut implemented enhanced workplace violence prevention training requirements for companies following termination or discipline procedures. The case remained notable for the claims Thornton made regarding discrimination that investigators could not substantiate through documentary evidence or witness testimony. The procedural irregularity in conducting the resignation meeting without union representation, while not considered causative, was documented in reviews as a departure from established protocols that characterize the company's labor relations framework. Number 9. Records at Virginia Beach Municipal Center showed that an employee submitted formal resignation paperwork on the morning of May 31, 2019, effective within 2 weeks per standard notice requirements. That same afternoon, the individual's identification badge registered multiple building access points across different floors within a compressed time frame, a pattern inconsistent with typical work behavior on a resignation day, when employees usually handle exit tasks in single locations. Dwayne Craddock earned an engineering degree and obtained professional licensure as a certified engineer before joining Virginia Beach's Public Utilities Department in the mid-2000s. His position involved infrastructure project planning, technical review of water and wastewater systems, and coordination with contractors on municipal construction projects. The role required specialized knowledge of hydraulic engineering principles and regulatory compliance standards. Craddock maintained an office at the Municipal Center and participated in project meetings, site inspections, and interdepartmental collaboration, typical of public works engineering positions. Colleagues described professional interactions focused primarily on technical matters. His personnel file documented years of satisfactory service without major disciplinary incidents. By 2018, supervisory staff began noting concerns about project completion, timelines, and communication patterns during team meetings. Performance improvement discussions were initiated following documented instances where deadlines were missed or coordination with other departments faltered. Human resources personnel became involved in formalizing performance plans, outlining expectations, and measurable objectives. The documentation process continued into early 2019, with periodic reviews scheduled to assess progress. On May 31, 2019, Craddock submitted resignation paperwork to his supervisor during morning hours, citing personal reasons for his departure and providing standard 2-week notice. The municipal center housed multiple city departments across several floors, with public works offices located on the second level. On the afternoon of May 31st, employees throughout the building were engaged in routine administrative tasks, project planning sessions, and public service functions. At approximately 4 p.m., individuals on multiple floors reported hearing sounds that prompted immediate concern. 12 people sustained fatal injuries. 4 others were wounded. Victims were located across different floors and in various sections of the building, including offices, hallways, and public service areas. Craddock moved through the facility, accessing multiple levels during the events. His resignation paperwork remained on his supervisor's desk from the morning submission. Virginia Beach Police received emergency calls beginning at 4:06 p.m. Officers arrived within minutes at the government complex, a secured facility requiring identification for entry beyond public areas. Witnesses who had evacuated provided descriptions indicating Craddock's involvement. Officers entered the building and initiated searches across multiple floors. The facility's size and complexity required systematic clearing procedures. Officers encountered Craddock on an upper floor, and an extended exchange of gunfire occurred. He sustained fatal injuries during the confrontation. Paramedics treated wounded individuals and transported them to regional trauma centers. The deceased included both municipal employees and a contractor working on a public utilities project. They were identified as Laquita Brown, Tara Gallagher, Mary Gale, Alexander Gusev, Catherine Nixon, Richard Nettleton, Christopher Rapp, Ryan Keith Cox, Joshua Hardy, Michelle Langer, Robert Williams, and Herbert Snelling. Investigators documented the scene across multiple floors and collected forensic evidence from different locations. Ex-building security systems were reviewed to track Craddock's movements through badge access logs. The data showed his progression through secured areas and timeline correlation with witness reports. Detectives examined his work computer and personal devices for communications, searches, or documentation indicating planning or motive. His personnel file was analyzed, including the recent performance improvement discussions and the resignation submission that morning. Co-workers were interviewed about his behavior in recent weeks, and any statements he had made regarding workplace dissatisfaction. Financial records, personal correspondence, and social media activity underwent review. Investigators consulted with mental health professionals to assess whether any behavioral indicators had been present that might explain the actions. Despite extensive analysis, a definitive motive beyond general workplace frustrations remained elusive. No criminal prosecution proceeded due to Craddock's death during the police response. Virginia Beach officials released investigative findings confirming his responsibility based on witness identifications, badge access records, forensic evidence, and timeline reconstruction. The Virginia Department of Criminal Justice Services conducted an independent review of the incident, examining security protocols at government facilities and threat assessment procedures for employees undergoing performance reviews. The analysis noted that Craddock had maintained building access despite submitting resignation paperwork, though standard protocols did not require immediate badge deactivation for employees providing notice. Federal workplace safety authorities examined whether the performance improvement process had included adequate monitoring for behavioral changes that might indicate escalating risk. Virginia Beach implemented enhanced security measures, including additional screening at public entrances and expanded surveillance coverage throughout the municipal center. Civil litigation filed by victims' families addressed security assessments and personnel management procedures. The city conducted internal reviews of how performance issues are documented and whether intervention protocols existed for employees showing signs of workplace stress. No evidence emerged of specific threats or concerning statements that would have triggered existing alert systems. Craddock's colleagues and supervisors indicated that while performance issues had been documented, and his demeanor had remained professionally controlled during improvement plan discussions. The investigation concluded without establishing a clear, comprehensive motive, noting only the confluence of performance concerns, resignation timing, and maintained building access. The administrative irregularity of an employee submitting resignation, yet accessing multiple secured floors shortly afterward, initiated the timeline analysis that reconstructed his movements through badge data and witness accounts across the facility's complex layout. Number 10. Security checkpoint personnel at the Washington Navy Yard reported to their shift supervisor on September 16, 2013, that a contractor had entered the facility carrying what appeared to be a disassembled equipment case consistent with computer hardware transportation. The individual presented valid identification credentials and passed through standard screening protocols designed for authorized personnel with security clearances. Several hours later, employees from different sections of the complex contacted base security, describing someone moving through Building 197 in a manner inconsistent with typical contractor work patterns. Aaron Alexis served in the United States Navy Reserves from 2007 to 2011, receiving training in aviation electronics and attaining the rank of Petty Officer 3rd Class. Following his military service, he transitioned into civilian information technology work, obtaining employment with contractors, providing services to federal agencies and military installations. His technical skills involved network administration, computer systems maintenance, and support for secure communications infrastructure. Alexis held security clearances required for accessing sensitive military facilities and data systems. He relocated multiple times for contract assignments, working at locations across different states as projects required. By 2013, he had secured a position with a firm contracted to provide IT support at the Washington Navy Yard in the District of Columbia. The assignment involved maintenance and troubleshooting of computer networks within Building 197, the Naval Sea Systems Command headquarters, where approximately 3,000 military and civilian personnel worked on ship design, engineering, and logistics programs. In the months preceding September 2013, Alexis made several contacts with medical facilities and law enforcement agencies in different jurisdictions. Police reports from Rhode Island documented an August 2013 incident where he reported hearing voices and experiencing sleep disturbances he attributed to external technological influences. He described beliefs that individuals were using microwave equipment or electromagnetic devices to target him. Medical personnel he consulted did not initiate sustained psychiatric treatment or intervention that would have flagged his security clearance status. Despite these documented contacts with authorities and medical providers, no formal mental health evaluation occurred that would trigger review of his authorized access to military installations. On September 16, 2013, Alexis entered the Washington Navy Yard using his contractor credentials during morning hours. Security systems recorded his passage through checkpoints at approximately 8 a.m. He had proceeded to Building 197, where his IT work was assigned. Between 8:15 and 8:30 a.m., employees working in different sections of the multi-story facility reported hearing sounds that caused immediate alarm. 12 individuals sustained fatal injuries. 3 others were wounded. Victims were located on multiple floors in offices, corridors, and work areas throughout the building. Personnel ranged from military officers to civilian engineers and administrative staff. Alexis moved through the structure, accessing different levels during the events. Metropolitan Police Department officers and naval security personnel responded to emergency calls beginning at 8:20 a.m. The facility's high security status required coordination between civilian law enforcement and military police authorities. Officers entered Building 197 and initiated evacuation procedures while searching for the source of the incident. The building's size and complex layout with restricted areas required systematic clearing. Witnesses who evacuated provided descriptions identifying Alexis. Officers located him on an upper floor, and an exchange of fire occurred. He sustained fatal injuries during the confrontation with law enforcement. Paramedics treated wounded individuals and transported them to area hospitals. The deceased included military personnel and civilian contractors. They were identified as Michael Arnold, Sylvia Frazier, Kathy Gard, John Roger Johnson, Frank Kohler, Kenneth Bernard Proctor, Vishnu Pandit, Arthur Daniels, Michael Ridgel, Mary Frances Knight, Gerald Redd, and Richard Michael Ridgel. Investigators processed the scene across multiple floors and collected forensic evidence from various locations. Building security footage and access logs were reviewed to establish Alexis's entry timeline and movement through the facility. His work computer and personal electronic devices were analyzed for communications or searches indicating planning. Mental health professionals were consulted to examine the August 2013 police reports and medical contacts describing paranoid beliefs and auditory experiences. Federal investigators reviewed his security clearance applications, the history, and the background check procedures that had approved his access to sensitive military sites. The examination revealed that mental health contacts in the weeks before the incident had not been reported to agencies responsible for maintaining clearance databases. Interview protocols for security clearance renewals did not include direct mental health screening beyond self-reported questionnaire responses. Co-workers and supervisors at his contracting firm were interviewed about behavior or statements suggesting deteriorating mental state. Several recalled him mentioning sleep problems, but not the specific paranoid content he had reported to police and medical providers in Rhode Island. No criminal prosecution occurred due to Alexis's death during the police response. The Department of Defense and Department of the Navy released investigative findings confirming his responsibility based on witness identifications, security footage, forensic evidence, and timeline documentation. Federal agencies conducted comprehensive reviews of security clearance procedures and mental health screening protocols for contractors working at military installations. The investigation identified significant gaps in information sharing between local law enforcement agencies, medical facilities, and federal security clearance administrators. The August 2013 police reports describing paranoid delusions had remained in local Rhode Island records without transmission to agencies managing Alexis's clearance status. No mechanism existed requiring medical providers to report concerning psychiatric symptoms encountered during routine consultations with individuals holding security clearances. The congressional oversight committees examined the adequacy of contractor vetting procedures and the frequency of clearance reevaluations for personnel with ongoing access to sensitive facilities. The Department of Defense implemented revised protocols requiring more frequent mental health assessments for contractors and expanded information sharing agreements between federal security offices and state law enforcement agencies. The Navy modified access procedures at high-security installations to include behavioral observation training for security checkpoint personnel. The case exposed systemic vulnerabilities in the contractor security clearance process, where mental health deterioration occurring between periodic reviews could go undetected. The unexpected witness reports from security personnel and employees about unusual movement patterns initiated the real-time response. Though the investigative focus ultimately centered on the months of documented mental health contacts that never reached clearance administrators responsible for assessing ongoing access authorization.